There's no easy way out.
Some people think, well, I don't have a brand, I just have a business. Well, you do have a brand, and your brand does mean something to your customers. You know, I say a brand is a combination of who you think you are and what your customers know you are. And hopefully who you think you are and what your customers think you are match. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the No Easy Way Out podcast. My name is Tony Nash, and we are coming to you as always from the Woodworth building in beautiful downtown Owasso, home to my company AZEE Branding Solutions, where we help grow your brand from A to Z. Now I'm super excited because we got such a great response to the new format of our podcast. The episode we did, Mike Tyson and Jake Paul fight, went crazy. Thank you for all the comments and the likes and the shares. Some of the stuff we did on Caitlin Clark did really well. So we've been enjoying it. We've been enjoying talking about some new things and all things branding, marketing, and the world of design. And today we are going to talk about, on our podcast, we're going to talk about podcasting. And I brought along my man, Dan. Dan, welcome to the show, man.
Hey,
Dan
man.
Dameron, Double Dan.
It's good to be here. Excited to be on the podcast.
You excited? Is this number
I'm
3 for
excited.
you?
This is well, it depends if we count the old after hours episodes.
We should.
This is my second regular podcast.
Solo.
And then we did a handful as
All right.
the whole
You've been on
after hours
several
crew.
times. And then you interviewed me for episode 100. That
I
was
did,
fun.
so
First
yeah.
time I've ever been a
Yeah.
guest on my own podcast, but
Yeah.
that was one of my favorite ones. So.
Yeah, I would say that I'm one of your longest standing podcast guests at this point. All the other AZ staff over the years.
They've moved on.
Yeah.
They moved on to bigger and better things.
We're the
maybe a little
faithful
bit.
remnant.
We know. Yeah. Plus, Dan's been involved with the podcast longer than anyone. And so today we're going to talk about why you should start a podcast for your brand. Why it's a
Yes.
good idea for your business. And so we're going to start by talking about what sparked this topic around the office. And we actually wrote an article about this. You can see it at our website, azeebranding.com, our brand new website. And we write blog articles weekly, so you can go check those out. But LeBron James and JJ Redick just started a new podcast called Mind the Game. You seen it?
I have. It's great.
What are your thoughts?
Man, I love it. It's really cool to hear someone speak to a particular topic, especially something they have expertise in. Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts in a nutshell.
Yeah.
It's, a lot of people know LeBron James for the tweets, for the sound bites. There's a lot of people that have the mindset of just shut up and dribble,
Yes.
right? We know that he's great on the basketball court, but how great, that is often debated.
That's by opinion.
That's
Yeah.
by opinion. And so I don't know. I think it's cool to hear somebody who, no doubt, is an expert in all things basketball, and to get to speak into those things with some authority. It's been really cool.
Some experience, some authority. Yeah, I would say this. LeBron James is one of the most hated, basketball, hated on, I should say. Maybe not hated. One of the most hated on. He brings the haters out
Yep.
Of all time, especially for the level of skill, the records that he's broken, the things that he is. And I used to be a huge LeBron hater. When LeBron left Cleveland and went to Miami, I was such a LeBron hater. I mean, there's so many posts that come up in my time hop of me just totally hating on LeBron because I'm not a big fan of the super team.
Yeah.
I like a team to have, maybe two really good players, have like some parity in the league. I feel like when there's super teams, it kind of just ruins the viewership. Like, that team's going to win, takes everyone's chances away. So I was a big hater on LeBron, especially the way he made the decision, made a big spectacle, brought ESPN in and just made this announcement. I'm like, what a joke. And then he went to Miami, won a couple championships.
Mm-hmm.
When he came back to Cleveland, I'm like, all right. I started watching again. He won that championship in 2016, came back from 3-1. And that's when I started kind of like, all right, I gotta watch LeBron more. Because when I was in my teen years, I hated Michael Jordan. We were Pistons fans.
Yep.
You couldn't be a Pistons fan and like Michael Jordan. It was almost like hard to like Jordan. Even though I love his sneakers, I always wear the Jordans. I never liked Jordan. But then after he retired, I'm like, man, I had all that opportunity to watch the GOAT, and I really didn't watch him because I didn't like him. So I told my boys, like, as much as you might hate LeBron, he's great. Mm-hmm. He's an unbelievable basketball player. And so, appreciate what he does for basketball. But then, he starts talking about stuff politically or, things that are controversial. And you think, this guy just is an idiot. Like, you just don't like listening to him.
You think
talk.
that.
That's what I think. Like, this guy does not know anything. It's always funny. There's so many clips of him, like, reading a book. He's always on page 1. Like, he's like acting like he's a reader, but why are you always on page 1 of the book? So you hear him talking like, this guy just doesn't know much about stuff. But then to hear him talk on this podcast about basketball, the dude's a savant. Like, he knows the game. And so I've been watching. I've watched the first 3 episodes, and I'm on episode 4 now. And, man, to listen to LeBron with JJ Redick, who is obviously a basketball genius, was an unbelievable player in college, but to listen to him talk about basketball, it's like, wow, he's brilliant.
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of it, but I would say, even though I don't agree with all the conclusions that
I made.
No. Well, yeah, that. But also that all the things that LeBron says, like, there's a lot of things that I would differ from him on. One thing that I've always given him props for is for actually using his platform to do something. We're gonna get into that a little bit later, I'm sure, of getting into that. But it's been cool to see him kind of sharing his own narrative in this podcast.
Well, what made me think about this is, people often ask, why do I do a podcast? Like, why would you do a podcast for your business? And I think for us, and we're going to talk about all the reasons why it's helped AZEE and helped, our brand, but it's a great way to tell your own story. And you've seen, like, athletes coming out recently in the last 4 or 5 years with their own podcast, like Draymond Green, like the Manning brothers, like the Kelsey brothers, Pat McAfee, Deion Sanders, all these athletes who are always talked about by the media. And the podcast is, like, actually giving them the opportunity to give you, number one, a player's perspective, which the media doesn't have.
Correct.
You have all these, armchair quarterbacks like me talking about what they would have done if they were in the big game, which, probably wouldn't have. But to hear it from a player's perspective is really cool to me as a sports fan. But then also them having the opportunity to kind of craft their own narrative, tell their own story. And instead of, Stephen A's opinion about LeBron or Max Kellerman's opinion about LeBron, we get to hear what LeBron thinks about, he in the first few episodes, he talks about, the 2016 finals. He talks about his leave going to Miami and kind of so you're kind of getting to hear his perspective, which you really never got to hear.
Even talks about how he would have played for Duke if he had known Coach K in the way that he did.
Yes, because he hated Duke growing up.
Yes.
But then getting to know Coach K through
the Olympics,
Team USA, and of course JJ Redick played for Duke.
Yep.
It was one of the reasons LeBron hated him. Hated on them, and JJ was a very cocky player in college. But yeah, hearing his perspective on the decisions he made, how he prefers the NBA versus college, and then hearing about his son playing in college and all the things he's going through, it's just been very interesting. And again, hearing him break down the game, you just realize, like, dude, this guy's not just an incredible athlete and talented player. The dude knows the game. He knows the ins and outs.
He does, and it's cool to hear those things in a longer format, right? Again, we're used to the sound bites. We're used to the maybe the longest format, right, is post game interviews. But other than that, it's just a lot of social media clips here and there. So to get to hear him speak to something with context to it,
with context,
is huge.
And I'm the type that always likes to stick around for the post game to hear the interviews of the players. But all the questions that the pundits ask are always leading questions, always trying to get a soundbite. And again, those clips are pulled out of context and used, and so you get these ideas about these guys, and you end up sometimes hating on these players because of a quote you heard that was fully out of context, and you didn't even know fully what they said. Whereas with the podcast, you're getting to, if you sit down and listen to it, you're getting to hear kind of the whole story. And I'm geeking out on it.
Yeah, it's really cool. But I was even just thinking as I started listening to his podcast, how there's one thing that he mentioned that I'm like, oh man, somebody could have taken that as a soundbite and it would have been a whole debate.
There was something they said. I can't remember what it was.
The one that stuck out to me in particular was him talking about, like, why he doesn't like college men's basketball. Like, some people could be like, oh, LeBron's arrogant. But it's like the bigger context that he was sharing is like, hey, so many of these guys, they do 1 year and then they're done. And so there's no loyalty, because they were talking about why this last year was there more viewership for the women NCAA basketball than there is for the men's. And he talked about, well, it's because a lot of the guys 1 year in, then they're off to the NBA.
Yeah, because I mean, you can have your team, like, being from Michigan. I'm a fan of Michigan basketball, but unless there's like a really good player or two that I'm like really getting into, or they're having a good season, I don't really follow it that much. And some people would call that a casual fan.
Yeah.
But with the girls, they stay all 4 years. They have to be 21 to even go in the WNBA. And like, all the best players in college now are forced to go, and so they don't have any loyalty to the team, and so it's hard to really like get into a team like that. So yeah, I mean, hearing him talk about that has been really cool. And for me, like, again, I think this gives LeBron, it was JJ's idea to start the podcast. The obvious reasons for him, like, why would you want a podcast with LeBron? Obviously getting all that clout. And it's really given me a newfound respect for JJ. I've listened to him a lot on ESPN, and I like his take from a player's perspective. But just seeing how much he knows the game and breaks it down, just a brilliant player. Of course, having learned from Coach K. But I think this gives LeBron a chance to kind of tell his own narrative, to write his own legacy, to put it out there. Now, there's still going to be haters that just won't listen because it's LeBron. But at least now he has the opportunity to tell his own story as opposed to just being victim to whatever anybody wants to say about him. So I think that's great. And, I put here, listening to LeBron talk about the game brings to light his genius, which appears as limited to basketball IQ. That's my opinion. His genius maybe appears to be limited to just basketball. I don't know that. Maybe that's me hating a little bit too, but he is brilliant when it comes to the game. So I've been impressed by that. My oldest son, Micah, who works with us, he can't stand LeBron. I'm telling him to listen to the podcast because it might change a little bit of his respect. He won't listen. So if we can get him, Micah, you're editing this podcast right now. You should go watch it. So let's talk about then, from a business perspective, if telling the narrative, if this is giving LeBron and players like Draymond Green, who's one of the most hated also players, and he brings a lot on himself. He's just a crazy, animated, charismatic player. But this giving him a chance to kind of tell his story. And if it's working for a lot of these athletes, bringing newfound fame to them, bringing a new audience to them, think about the Kelsey brothers, and it's working for their brands. We've been talking about this for years, why it's a good idea for a brand or a business to have their own podcast because of a lot of reasons. But I kind of want to transition this conversation into, beyond LeBron's podcast, why it's been good for him, why it's a good idea for businesses to start a podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe you could speak to that a little bit, why you think some good reasons.
Yeah, the thing that I always tell people, and it definitely transcends podcasts, but I think it applies especially with podcasts, is whether you're a business owner, whether you've got your own brand, your story is being told with or without you.
Correct.
Right? And so having a podcast, taking charge of your brand, you get to help tell that story instead of it being what everybody else is speaking about you. I was talking to someone just earlier about, say a business owner takes over a company that even though they've got it on a great track, it's got a troublesome past because of prior management, prior ownership, and they go, well, yeah, but it's new and we're doing new things. It's like, well, yeah, but if you don't communicate that,
right,
no one's going to know the difference. And people are just going to I went to that place 10 years ago. It was terrible. The service was terrible. And so I just think, man, there's such a power in taking charge and telling your story because your story is being told. It's just a matter of if it's the true story or not.
That's absolutely right. I mean, every business brand has a story, and it could be in someone's mind a true story or it could be fiction. It's really up to you to tell the story. And if you want people to know the story, someone's going to craft it. And we have found here that having a regular podcast, ours comes out every Monday. We do seasons of 24. We take a little break, but it's given us an opportunity to introduce so many people to the culture of AZEE, whether that be by the guests that we've had, the topics that we talk about, talking about things that are happening within our community. I think that AZEE in our community is one of the most known groups of people. Like on the street, I have so many people come up to me and know things that are happening here. Not because people are in here seeing it, but just because we tell our story well. Sometimes the story that's being told even makes us seem greater than we really are, but is giving us the opportunity to kind of craft our own narrative and tell our own story.
Yeah. I can't say how many times I'm just like at the bank or someone goes, hey, when you guys said this or when you did that, that was so. And I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, it was on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, yeah, I did say that. Or, oh, yeah, Tony did say that.
Yeah. Yeah, and then sometimes we've had to, even maybe apologize for something that I've said on the podcast. But it's giving us the chance to tell our own, producing a podcast, it's a lot of work. We have a team here. So you're like, oh, well, it's easy for you because you have a team. We have to pay for it. It's a lot of work. But you don't have to do a full setup like this. You don't have to have a studio. You don't have to have professional cameras. You can do a podcast from your phone. You could make a phone video. You could start by doing little clips on Instagram or YouTube or whatever. But some sort of a regular scheduled program or narrative that you're crafting about you I think is a valuable tool. It's not a necessity to your brand. It's not a must-have, but it's been a huge help to AZ.
Yeah.
I think, a lot of people also say, man, it looks so much fun. It looks like it's so much fun to work at AZ. And I think it is. We have a great time. But there's probably 85% of the time, we're just working. We're just head down, building websites, making videos, creating graphics, printing shirts, making signs. Like, we're just working. But because we are a fun company, we want to show that. And having something like a podcast or a vlog or things that we've done have helped us tell that story. So I think that it's something that if you're struggling to really get the word out about what you're doing, I think you might consider starting a podcast for your business, for your brand. Well, what would I talk about? I don't know. I mean, figure out what your niche is. You're a restaurant, talk about food, what you do, what you like. And of course, if you need help, Dan, what should they do if they need help?
You should call AZ.
There you go. Cheap plug, right? I mean, we actually produced several over the years. We've produced more than a dozen podcasts. Some were 1 season long, some were a few episodes, and people kind of petered out. And some of them are still long running podcasts. And we have options to help you fully produce it, or to have you film it and we edit it, or to give you tips on how to set up. But get a hold of us. We're happy to help you because I think it's a good reason. I put here 5 reasons. Again, the article that we wrote on this is on azeebranding.com. Link right here. Go check it out. You can see the thing. But there are 5. We put 5 compelling reasons to start your own podcast. Dan, do you know what those 5 are? I won't quiz you, but maybe you know.
I know a few of them. I'll let you take it away from here, though.
Well, the first one is it gives you the opportunity to tell your own story. We've talked about that a lot. It gives you the chance to tell your own story. But secondly, one of the things we like about it is what we call in the office, because of Casey, HFC, high fidelity content. Explain what that means.
Yeah, it means that you're taking this one large piece of content and then you're breaking it down into smaller, more bite-sized, digestible things. So this podcast that's going to be 30 minutes-ish long is going to make for us 3 or 4 other pieces of content.
At least.
When you even just compare and contrast that with sitting down and trying to make a design. Some of you might be doing your own branding. You're using Canva, or maybe you're more advanced. You're using Illustrator. It's challenging to do all that. So with this, we get to sit down right now for 30 minutes, take a few minutes to edit it, and then after that, we're going to have several clips that we can use, that we can repurpose.
Yeah, and there's lots of tools that you can use to even take and repurpose that content for you. But for example, the Mike Tyson, Jake Paul episode we did, the actual podcast, the long-form podcast, got maybe 5,000 to 8,000 views between Facebook, YouTube, and some of the other platforms we post on. But then the clips that we sent out on TikTok and Instagram Reels and Facebook Reels and LinkedIn, that's well over 75,000 views right now amongst all things. So it's giving us not just, one piece of content, but again, why it's a good reason is because if you struggle to find content, take the time once a month to produce a couple episodes and then turn those bigger episodes into smaller bite-sized pieces.
I'll say they also serve as like a funnel to get people to your podcast. I can't tell you how many times I've stumbled across a TikTok or a reel and it's a podcast and I'm going, oh, that's really good. And then I follow the link back and I actually end up consuming the whole. I think most podcasts that I've actually taken the time to watch
For sure.
has been because there was a short teaser somewhere that actually made me interested. Because honestly, if you put in front of me a 30-minute piece of content, or think about Joe Rogan, a 3-hour piece of content, I'm not gonna invest my time in that. But when you bait me in with that little 30-second clip,
I've actually never watched an entire Joe Rogan podcast.
Oh, you're
but
missing out. It's a journey.
I've probably consumed more Joe Rogan podcast clips than anybody else. And so that's the brilliance of it, is there are moments within a podcast that are very, very interesting, and maybe some that you might not find. But taking that content, telling that story through those clips, and we're going to rank our 5 favorite podcasts at the end, and all 5 of mine really I started listening to because I saw a clip on TikTok or Reels or something like that. The other reason, a couple of reasons, is it helps you reach a new audience. I mean, we've reached people that we didn't even know about because of our podcast. People watch it because they were interested in the topic. They were interested in the guest. All of a sudden, they're calling us like, oh, I didn't know you guys did websites, or I didn't know you guys printed apparel, and it's helped us reach new people. And so you put that out there, you never know who you might reach. Increases your credibility and expertise. I mean, it gives us the opportunity, just like right now, to talk about the things that we really know. We know a little bit about LeBron James and JJ Redick because we're casual basketball fans, but we know a lot about podcasts. We've been doing it now for 4 or 5 years. We're 125. This is episode 125. So, I would consider us experts in that. We have expert video people, editors. So
I would say too, we've got 3 different people on staff here at AZEE that have had their own podcast.
Right.
And so in my case, I would say you're not going to learn a whole lot from what I did, but I can tell you a whole lot that you can learn from what I should have done or what I would do again the next time around.
experience breeds knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So, and then, I think the last one, but real obvious, but it's a great opportunity to promote your brand. I mean, we are sitting in the AZEE studio. We don't even talk about AZEE that much, but we talk about what our brand is and what it does. And because of that kind of intrinsic conversation that happens, people are taking notice, people are paying attention, and people are reaching out. So our brand awareness has grown exponentially thanks to our podcast.
Yeah, I would say I've seen it work its way out for our clients too. And there's one client in particular I'm thinking of, Josh's Frogs. They're an exotic pet reptile plant distributor.
Check them out.
Check them out. And I remember when I first started here, we had a contract for them doing these videos where they were doing like these instructional how-to videos.
Yeah.
And we were doing several of those a month. And let me tell you, they took a lot of time to produce, and their people that work there are all subject matter experts.
For sure.
But in that presentation, it didn't always come across that way because they're nervous because
rehearsed,
it just was a new, unfamiliar thing. But now Josh has flipped the script, and now he's got his own podcast, and now he's bringing these same people on that I saw look some of them uncomfortable in the video or anxious as they're trying to figure out how to navigate that. And he's asking them really good questions, and he's pulling that knowledge out of them. And I'm like, I had no idea. Every time we're there, I learned something new.
Absolutely. And their YouTube engagement has gone. I mean, they already had a good sized YouTube following, but now they're producing regular content. They're also taking the big clips and making smaller clips. But it is more than tripled their, I was talking to Josh, more than tripled their YouTube exposure and engagement and viewership. So, man, what a great way. And again, maybe you're thinking, I don't know how to do that. I don't know where to begin. Like I said, we have people that didn't have a clue and just started small with us and have grown. And so if you're interested in doing a podcast, I know you're thinking about it. You thought, I should do that. I would enjoy that. You have something you want to talk about, get a hold of us. We're happy to help.
Yeah.
So, I think LeBron, JJ are kind of doing the right thing, in my opinion, for the LeBron James brand. I mean, for the JJ Redick brand, there's really not much of a brand, right? I mean, he's building kind of this brand. I think he's going to become more popular as an analyst.
He's getting clout by association.
Yeah, but I think he's going to be more popular as an analyst than he was as a player.
Yeah.
So as he's building this new brand of, I was a great player in college, a decent player in the NBA, but now I'm going to be this really good analyst and show. I think it's great for his brand. It's bringing new eyes to him. Of course, he picked the right guy to saddle himself to. But for LeBron, man, what a brilliant move, in my opinion, to take the time once a week or a couple times a month and sit down and tell your own story. I think great job there. So I think for you as a business owner, you have that story. You think people know it. They probably don't. Come up with some sort of a way to get that out there to them regularly. And again, I'll say it one more time. If you need help, that's what we do here. So even if you just need a consultation, if you need a consultation, just get a hold of us. We'll sit down with you. We're happy to kind of talk you through the steps and the process and what you can do. So anything that we missed, Dan?
I would just give some encouragement to just start wherever you're at with where you're at. But I would say, man, if you're going, I want to jump in, I want to do a podcast, take the time and just write down, what are 10 things that you'd want to talk about? Or 10 things that you feel like maybe it's something about your culture that you want to put out to the world. Maybe it's something about your history or about your services and those sorts of things. But I would say generate a list of ideas before you start. The majority of podcasts don't make it past episode 2 or 3. My podcast didn't make it past episode 3. I loved it, but then life gets busy and you're like, I'm tired of generating new ideas. And so I'd say, man, just jot down your first 10 ideas, and that's your first 10 episodes, and just commit to it. Maybe they're 5 minutes long. Maybe they're 20 minutes long. Maybe it's a commuter podcast. Maybe you're someone that likes to talk, and it's going to be a Joe Rogan experience, 3-hour experience. But I would say I just start today.
Yeah, I would say one of my favorite podcasts is the Working Genius podcast, which was a podcast that was made, and I didn't put it in my top 5 because it was, I don't know if you call it a mini cast. They produced one season of it to really talk about this book and this concept of Working Genius, which we use here. And so maybe you're like, I don't want to do 10 seasons or 5 seasons, but maybe you're like Dan said, you want to introduce people to your culture. So maybe you just plan, I'm going to do 1 season of a podcast, 10 episodes, 5 episodes, to really have a format where I can sit down, and then it's out there forever. You put it out there, it can be used and repurposed. It doesn't have to be a forever thing. And so, take the opportunity to find ways to tell your own story. And like Dan said, start with an idea, put some things down, and we're happy to help wherever we can. So, I think we covered it all. Is there anything else brilliant that you had that you wanted to say today, Dan?
I just
Before
think
we rank.
Yeah, I think just doubling down on telling your own story. I was sharing this example with somebody in the office earlier today of my wife and I, guilty pleasure. We like watching American Idol. Not the old American Idol, the new American Idol. That's more about musicianship.
That's where I fell in love with Carrie Underwood.
The new stuff is much more about finding those authentic singer-songwriters. And so we've really enjoyed watching that. And yesterday, or I guess it was a couple weeks ago, we watched yesterday, Jelly Roll, recent New Artist of the Year,
tell me who that
Grammy
was.
Award winner. He was one of the judges, and I was like, this guy, my only context is he's like kind of like a crossover from hip hop to country. He does the new country thing. Okay. I'm not a huge fan of country music at all, but especially not new country music. And, he's a big dude. He's got face tats. And I had all these presuppositions about who he was and what he was all about. He was an ex-convict and all this stuff. But I'll tell you what, my whole perception of him changed from actually seeing him encounter or his interactions with people outside of performing, outside of the songs that I hear on the radio. And it just really humanized him as an individual. And I think it's doing the same thing for LeBron James. And so I think, I think a podcast is a phenomenal way that you can humanize your brand, because the people that we are, it doesn't always come across naturally. And so again, tell people, tell your story.
Yeah. I feel like more people feel like they know me. And like I said, I'll go through the store and people will come up and start talking about my podcast who I've never met. And I love that. I love having that conversation with people. And so it's just giving people kind of access into who you are, like you said, humanizing you. So again, I couldn't reiterate it more. You should come up with something. You should do it. It's a worthwhile investment. It's worked wonders for us. And you could talk to several people who we've done for that would attest to that as well. Okay, so let's take a minute and pause from the podcast to appreciate and thank and talk about one of our season sponsors, and that is Delk Siding Solutions. Delk Siding Solutions, your licensed siding contractor serving Lansing, Owasso, Flint, and the surrounding areas. They specialize in a wide range of siding services, including siding repair, siding replacement, and residential siding installation. So get your siding with Delk. With years of experience in the industry, they understand the importance of quality workmanship and exceptional customer service. We can attest to that. They are awesome over there. When you choose Delk Siding Solutions, you can trust that your siding project is in capable hands. As licensed and insured company, they pride themselves on delivering reliable and professional solutions to their valued clients. That could be you. Their team of skilled professionals is committed to completing every project to the highest standards using top quality, modern siding products that meet and exceed industry requirements. That was a mouthful. I can't believe I got through it all, but good job, Tony. Pat myself on the back for that one. From high-end name brands like James Hardie to reliable, tried and true alternatives, they supply customers with better options for beautiful building exteriors. Reach out to them today to get started on your project. Of course, their website is right here. Get a hold of them if you need your house sided or roofing done. They are your solution. Thank you to Delk Siding Solutions for being one of our sponsors. Before we sign off, we're going to do like we do at the end of every episode, is we're going to rank something. So we decided to rank our 5 favorite podcasts. These are not necessarily the 5 greatest podcasts of all time, but everyone's always asking, what's a good podcast to listen to? Here's 5 that we enjoy. So we'll kind of go back and forth. We'll start with 5, work our way down to 1. We'll give you who we like and a little bit why, and then you can choose to agree, disagree. But let us know in the comments who you liked to listen to, who your favorite podcasts are. I'm always looking for new ones, and so maybe you'll send something that I really enjoy. So Dan, number 5, who's Dan's favorite number 5 favorite podcaster?
Already mentioned it, Joe Rogan experience.
Joe Rogan. Yeah, Joe Rogan is great. I didn't have him on my top 5, but he's definitely up there. I put number 5, another sports podcast, Draymond Green, because he was a guy that I could not stand. He's like the guy that you would love it if he's on your team, but you love to hate him. Mm-hmm. But listening to him talk, man, I really have gotten to like Draymond. Who's your number 4?
It's actually a friend of mine that recently passed away. His name's Ken, and he had a podcast called Stuff I Want to Say. Mostly for men. Okay. And so it's just really cool teaching.
Is it still out there?
Still out there. Just really good content. Stuff I want to say, mostly for men, about what it means to be a man.
All right. I wish I knew what it meant to be a man. My number 4 is maybe a little controversial, but I think he articulates things in such a way that just makes crystal clear sense, and that's Jordan Peterson. He, like I said, I think it's his articulation. He has such a calm demeanor about him and is able to say things in a way that just makes good common sense. Number 3 for Dan.
Well, some of you know I'm also a pastor and church planter, and so the New Churches podcast, I love church planting. I love learning more about it. I love hearing about other people's journey. It's been a pretty cool resource for me.
All right. My number 3 is 21st and Prime. I love me some Prime. Deion Sanders. He just motivates me. I love the way he says things. I love his personality. He's a coach. I like coaching. So I love his principles, his philosophy. So 21st and Prime. Number 2?
Walking the Floor with Chris Shiflett.
All right.
So Chris Shiflett, guitar player for the Foo Fighters, and he just has a lot of great artists on the interview. So I think what baited me in is he did an interview with Chris Stapleton, Love Stapleton, contrary to not liking country, but that's a story for another time. And
he's a little different than country.
And yeah, there's just some really cool interviews with artists on there.
Number 2 for me is a comedian, one of my favorite comedians, Bill Burr. Bill has some very colorful language, and so not for the faint of heart or for the sensitive, but his comedic take on politics, sports, news, and just everyday situations cracks me up. His podcast literally makes me LOL. All right, and so drum roll, big number 1. Dan, what is your favorite podcast?
This past weekend with Theo Vaughn.
Oh, dude, that is a good one. I've actually never watched a full episode of that. I did put that on my, if we were going to do an honorable mentions, but Theo Vaughn is pretty funny. And my number 1, do you think you could guess?
Well, it can't be your own podcast, right?
No. That's not even in the top 10. But I thought you might know because we tried to get him to be on episode 100 of our podcast. I don't know what it's
called, but it's Gary V.
The Gary V Experience. We tried to get Gary V to be our guest on episode 100. Now we got to try to get to 200 to see if we can get his attention. But man, Gary V is like super animated, exciting, just motivates.
He talks like this.
He's got a high voice, annoying, again, colorful language, but the way he breaks things down from a business standpoint, like I just get it. He gets me and I get him. So I like me some Gary V. So, well, thanks for doing that. Appreciate it. Thanks for taking some time to come on the show today and talk about podcasting. Again, here at AZEE Branding Solutions, we are a one-stop branding solution. We're blessed to be surrounded by a team of creative branding experts that really will help you connect your brand to your buyer. That's what we're all about here. So if you need help with that, we're here to help you. We would love to be a part of your branding journey. So thanks for coming on this ride with us. Remember, as my mother always said, you can't and never could until you tried. So go out there and try something great, my friends, and don't take the easy way out. We'll see you next time.